1.
Non-rockabotus must stop. I don't want to rock the boat. I want to sink it.
Are you going to bark all day, little doggy? Or are you going to bite?
Brett, I love you, Jeff.
Delusional, yeah. Delusional's okay in your worldview. I'm an animal. You don't chastise chickens for being delusional. You don't chastise pigs for being delusional. So you calling me delusional using your worldview is perfectly okay. It doesn't really hurt. She hung up on me.
What?
Desperate times call for faithful men and not for careful men. The careful men come later and write the biographies of the faithful men, lauding them for their courage.
Go into all the world and make disciples. Not go into the world and make buddies. Not to make brosives.
Right.
Don't go into the world and make homies.
Right.
Disciples.
I got a bit of a jiggle neck. That's a joke, Pastor.
When we have the real message of truth, we cannot let somebody say they're speaking truth when they're not.
Take an amazing journey to a place that will blow your mind and move your heart so you will never be the same again.
What is up? Welcome back to another episode of Apologia Radio. This is Luke the Bear hosting today with Joy the girl on my left. And old Nostradamus is back here.
Nostradamus, flaring and blaring on the ones and twos, as he used to call me.
It's been some time since we had Jerry here, but he's doing his own thing now with Cultish, which is doing well. We're excited about that.
Way to go, Jerry!
Thanks, man.
So if you haven't heard Cultish, you should check it out. It's awesome. And then the voice you just heard is my good friend Darren Doane.
Oh, it's good to be here. This is kind of my, well, let's be honest, you're the only people that invite me on, but it's kind of like my second home.
Man, I didn't even know this. I'm so happy that Darren's on here. I didn't even know he's actually on family vacation. He took time out of his vacation to come on today, so I'm very excited about that.
Good to be here.
Thanks, dude. Well, hey, obviously Jeff's not here. He's actually in Darren's neck of the woods right now. He's moving his son Sage to Moscow to attend New St. Andrews, so we're excited about that.
Let's be honest, Jeff couldn't even be in this conversation.
I know.
This isn't his world. So
I know.
It's good to get Jeff out for a moment. We're not talking hair product. We're not talking vaping. We're not talking karate. It's time to get down to some real stuff.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, we didn't have a show last week, in case you missed that. We were all over the East Coast last week. We filmed all kinds of stuff, so we watched for that. We were in New York City. We filmed stuff for Margaret Sanger. We did stuff for Stonewall. We did stuff for Mormonism and Joseph Smith and Palmyra, and then we were up in Ontario for the Runner Academy at the Ezra Institute with Joe Boot and Andrew Sandlin. So be watching for all that jazz. But I'm just gonna bring us right into this because I'm super excited. So we have Darren on today to talk about Tooth and Nail Records. This is an area we don't really dive into much, the music industry, which I wish we had more time. I wish if I had time I would have a whole podcast on music, but you'll get me going for hours on music. But
really quick, hold on. And for those of you who are listening who are confused right now, yes, Luke does talk, and he's talking right now, and there's going to be a lot of Luke. So if you get weirded out, that's because Luke's going to be talking a lot today.
That's right. That's true. Thank you.
Yeah, an episode with Jeff about music would be something. We called something about like Trance and Nail Records or something like that.
Transcendental Records.
Oh,
that's good. I just came with them. So
Nobody steal that.
So what has brought on this discussion is a new I'd say new, but it goes back till December of last year, I think, or something, November. It's called the Labeled Podcast, and it's a history of Tooth and Nail Records. It's done by the guitarist, I believe, from Emery. And Summer actually turned me onto it.
I was gonna totally take credit for it and talk about Sheologians because that Labeled came up in a Summer and I recommended what we're listening to this summer, and we talked about and just gave recommendations to people, and that was one of her recommendations. She told me about it.
Okay.
And then I think 30 minutes later, I was at a barbecue looking at your wife, and I was like, okay, I have to tell you about this thing.
So it actually came, I think so you probably told my wife, and I think Summer told me directly.
Yeah.
Okay. So I started listening to it. I guess about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and I like just busted through the whole
not hard to
show.
get through.
There's not a lot of them, but it's completely blown my mind. Reason being, listening to it, I'm realizing that if you listen to the podcast, they talk about tooth and nail kids, and basically I am a tooth and nail kid. Didn't realize that, but like listening to this episode or this podcast, I'm like, man, like my wife and I started dating when we started listening to Tooth and Nail records back in.
I wish
like
I love Tooth and Nail, but I don't even know if I can call myself a Tooth and Nail
You're
kid.
probably second generation.
Luke is a blood in Tooth and Nail kid.
Yes, yeah. So like
I know that.
Luke, when I was at ReformCon, I was talking to you and your wife, and I just happened to casually mention like MXPX or Supertones or something, and you were like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What? And I was like, oh, and it's funny that kind of gave me the first indication that we were at a point now where that meant something to a generation, and I was like, oh, there's something here.
Yeah, so we're gonna get into that here in a minute. So, like, especially like MXPX and stuff. Yeah, so that was like my introduction into something that wasn't mainstream. It wasn't Michael W. Smith and Twyla Paris, right? Like it was MXPX, Supertones, Overcome, Focal Point. Those were like some of my first CDs that I bought. And this was like 96, 97 when I started getting into that stuff. And listening to this podcast, Tooth and Nail started really, I think it was 93 or 94, I think. So we were basically from the beginning. So I started listening to this podcast. It's amazing, right? And it's blowing my mind because I know all these people. I know all these names they're mentioning, these places, bands, and I'm just, everything's kind of coming together for me. So I kept hearing, especially in the MXPX episode, I kept hearing them mention Darren Doane and his crew doing this music video. And so I texted Darren. I was like, dude, you keep getting name dropped.
I know him.
Yeah.
I know him.
And he's like, really? You're like, really? So so that started this whole conversation. And so actually, I totally forgot. Before we even get into that, what are you up to right now, Darren? And then from there, tell us your interaction with Tooth and Nail and how that's affected you in your life, because it's tremendous. And then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, well, what I'm up to is actually really this. I mean, I've taken my production company, which I've had for almost 30 years now, started filmmaking right out of high school, and I've just been grinding as a filmmaker for a long time. And music videos have been a big part of that, which we'll talk about. Couple labels, Epitaph Records, Victory Records, and Tooth and Nail Records, probably having the biggest impact on my career. But what I'm doing right now is actually this. In January, I kind of rebranded my entire company. Focused more about being a creative agency, and then really specializing in making sure we got deep into social media, social platforms, the future of content, and then stuff like this. I mean, this is where we're at right now in regards to communicating, sharing ideas. Where's the attention? How do you meet people? How do you reach out to people? I'm sitting here doing your show. We can't even call it a radio show anymore because it's not a radio show anymore. It's a content show which lives on YouTube. It's going to live as a podcast probably. There's going to be a video portion of it, and I'm doing Instagram Live right now.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes of it, this is what I'm interested in. This is why, I'd always make time for you guys, but it was also a great opportunity to say, okay, I'm trying to demo for my clients what the future is, and the future is doing stuff like this. And so I'm trying it. It's awkward because I'm live over here on Instagram, so I don't want to mess up, right? I mean, people are watching me. I'm trying to interact over here as well, waving to people, high-fiving, doing the show. So I just want to be the, I just want to be the test pilot for everything. And so that's why I love doing this. And the fact that there was a tie-in now, part of building your brand is also telling your story.
Yeah.
I kind of tell people now that, when you hear the word brand building, just replace that with reputation. This is reputation building. And so any opportunity that a brand or a company has to tell their story, to communicate how long you've been here, whether it's a year or 30 years like myself, those are great opportunities.
Right on. And so you're actually you're going to be doing something with MXPX here soon, right? Or a little series. Can we talk about that, or is that top secret?
Maybe we will see. I'm supposed to go on Mike Herrera's podcast at some point.
Oh,
he actually reached out. So we've got that, and I kind of sent them a message saying, hey, let's just do a music video again. Let's just meet up and do a music video together again.
Yeah.
Let's just have some fun and do it. So we'll see what happens there. But I think there's just a lot of energy right now around this whole subject. So it's perfect for me.
Oh, I'm excited, man. Plus, you're doing all this amazing stuff with Uncle Gary and.
Oh yeah, Gary DeMar, kind of rebuilding and establishing the Gary DeMar brand and American Vision. I've got a lot of great clients. Sierra International Machinery is one of again, I'm all over the board, from authors to people that make machines to musicians. I'm doing a pretty fun campaign for Yamaha guitars right now. I have a page over on Facebook called Jam House. If you find Jam House, we're creating a ton of original content with surfers and skaters and musicians. We've got that going on. So then, of course, building my own brand and doing what I'm doing right now, which is I really want to be I just want to be in the game on social media, because I think we're at a time right now where people are still on the fence. Surprisingly, I think all the cool kids are still on the fence. Everyone uses it. Everyone's on their phone every day.
Yeah.
We know that, but everyone still pulls this thing like, well, but what's the next platform? What's the next platform? And I want to be the one that is saying, it doesn't matter what the next platform is. Let's use every platform we have at the moment and maximize it.
Yeah, right on.
Hey, Darren, I just want to say real quickly, I love everything that you do, man. And one of my biggest takeaways that I ever got from you is when you were just talking about when you were working with Kid Rock and how he approached you, if I remember correctly, to do a specific music video for you. But you didn't like the content because it had stuff in there that weren't in line with your family values. So you basically said, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Get back to me when you want to do something related to this. And then you came back. Yeah. So it's almost he had to abide in your terms. Not that you were preaching to him, but you did good enough of a job where he had to adhere to your standards. And that's always been a huge takeaway with how I think about how I do what I'm building.
That. Yeah, it was a really funny moment. I was doing a Zach Brown music video. I met him for the first time that day. He was a cameo in a video for a song called Toes by Zach Brown. And we were shooting this big scene. It was a crazy scene. And afterwards, we had like sea-doos and helicopter chases and boats and all this stuff. And afterwards, we were just sitting there. And he just looked at me. He's like, hey, me and you should make a video together. And I said, hey, as soon as you're ready to get rid of stripper poles in your videos, call me. And he just kind of laughed and kind of looked at me. And I kind of looked at him. And he was like, oh, you're serious? I'm like, yeah. And he was like, all right. He was like, all right. And like a year and a half later, I got a call from his manager. And he said, hey, Bobby's ready to do a video without stripper poles. And it was like, awesome. Okay, here we go.
That's a great story.
But yeah, and so I just love this. I mean, I love what you guys are doing. Even with you guys, I said it before. I'll just say it one more time. Thinking back now about what you guys have been doing, grinding in the dirt for so long, and doing what you're doing. I didn't even get it. So it's fun now for me to look back at what you guys are doing. And I'm just stealing as much as I can from you guys as well.
Man,
so
that's a compliment, dude. I appreciate it.
Thanks for being an inspiration over this way too.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that because we feel the same about you. So before we get any further, I have to mention, my podcast, the Doanecast. Oh yeah, the Doanecast.
You need to promote. The Doanecast is on. You can find it on YouTube, or you can find it on Spotify. I think iTunes. The Doanecast. I think I'm up to 8 or 9 now. Pretty fired up on that. So the Doanecast. All right, go.
Check that up. So I have to mention before I go any further, I'm wearing my brand new. I went and saw August Burns Red last night with Isaac actually. So if we're a little hard of hearing today, I apologize.
It's okay.
Awesome show. Speaking of Tooth and Nail Records, just happened to see August Burns Red, their 10-year anniversary tour for the Constellations album. They played the whole album straight through. It was amazing. The best light show I've ever seen at a metal show. It was incredible. Anyways, so August Burns Red, check them out. One of my favorite bands. They're amazing. Okay, so just tell us how, Darren, how you got involved with Tooth and Nail, and and how that's affected your life, and then that'll bring us into the next discussion. So go for it.
Sure. So I'm doing, I'm the young hot music video director only because Blink 182 blows up, and so there's a point when I'm just begging to do music videos, and then I somehow wander into this sort of punk rock camp. I'm doing bands like Pennywise and Guttermouth and all the stuff over on Epitaph Records, and I'm the only guy doing music videos. That's a young kid, and they don't want to work with a bunch of older dudes. They want someone young that's around the scene, and I'm the guy. And then Blink was with Pennywise. They were kind of, they're like baby brothers. I do a Blink video for a song called M&M's when they were still on Cargo Records. And then all of a sudden they get signed to MCA Records, and people didn't really care about Blink yet. And we shoot a music video. We shoot the video for a song called Growing Up, or Damn It. I think it's an alternate title there. I think it was called Damn It, but they eventually changed it to Growing Up because when it got popular, they just couldn't have a song called Damn It. And and so all of a sudden, we're editing the music video, and the song blows up on the radio, and they're all of a sudden Blink just blows up overnight, and I'm the hot young director. Names are on MTV. The director's name, like everyone just kind of blows up literally overnight. And I'm not a Christian at this time, and it's we're in Hollywood or something, and life's going really, really good. And like 1 a.m, and I was with some people, and we were walking, and a guy turns to me who I'd kind of met from another guy who found out I was a music video director, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to make some money off some Christians?" And I was like, what are you talking about? And he started explaining to me that there was a thing called Christian music, and he was like, yeah, for every band you can think of, there's a Christian version. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, what are you talking? This is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. And he kind of explained it to me, and he goes, hey, there's this band, there's this label called Tooth and Nail Records, and if they can't get their music videos played on MTV, but if you did a music video for one of their bands, at least they'd have someone who has a name value at MTV. And at that time, I was kind of like, I definitely had some cred at MTV, and they were like, at least they could use your name as directing the video. And the actual, I've told the story condensed, but the actual story goes that the first video I actually do is for an artist named Mike Knott. And Mike Knott, for a song called Tattoo, I did that video, and which is really interesting how this all ties in, because at the end of that video, and I've been told lately that was actually Tooth and Nail's first music video. I don't know if that's true or not. But if it was, then that's some pretty cool kind of lore for Tooth and Nail, that the Mike Knott Tattoo music video. But at the end of that video, Mike Knott kind of comes up into frame, and we covered him in pasta and flour. I don't know why, but he comes up and he starts shaking at the end of the song. He's going like this, like Zeppelin-esque, Robert Plant, and he's like, and he's shaking. And I started shaking the camera while he was doing it. And at the end of that take, I remember thinking, I've never seen anyone shake the camera before. And I've never shook my camera before, which is funny because that would become like my staple. Like the camera shake thing was like the thing that I was doing.
Yeah,
but
shaky
anyway,
cam.
So we shoot that video, but then I'm talking to Brandon Ebel on the phone afterwards, and Brandon says, hey, I've got this band called MXPX, or this punk band, and you're doing all the punk stuff, and man, if we could get you to do this band, because I can't get MTV to play them, and because I think they had shot a music video for them. But anyway, so I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I then shoot, a video for a song called Punk Rock Show, and we go out to Orange County, and everyone's hanging out. And we just ran around to aqueducts and and just ran around just with Super 8 cameras, and we just shot this video. And finished that one, and then I think we also did a video for a song called Doing Time, and then I think a song, not Doing Time, we did a video for a song called Money Tree, and then I think the song for Teenage Politics, I forget, but that was the first album. And now I'm kind of just getting to know the Tooth and Nail, people there, and I'm talking to Brandon Ebel on the phone, and at that point, I knew a lot of people in the industry. It took one phone call to realize that Brandon Ebel was the absolute smartest human being I'd ever met when it came to business and the music industry. And even when like lawsuits were going on and there was all this controversy about who could own what and publishing and MXPX later down the line and bands being upset, I remember, I don't know if he'd ever admit to this, but I remember Brandon Ebel looking at me in the midst of all that because I asked him about it. And this is a long time ago. And Brandon Ebel said, Darren, I've run the numbers. Unless you're Capitol Records and you have the Beatles catalog and you have all that money sitting there, there's no way you can make money off music unless you have a piece of every single thing a band does.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And here we are 20 years later, 25 years later from saying that in every major label record deal from Shinedown to Madonna, you name it, like it's a 360 deal. It's called a 360 deal. You have a piece of touring, merchandise, music. Brandon knew that. But anyway, so that kind of starts Tooth and Nail, me doing videos for them. And then they had the next MXPX record, and there was a song called Move to Bremerton, and they were convinced that this was going to be the hit. They were convinced. And so they hired me to come up and do a video for Move to Bremerton. We drive up to Seattle, we go over to Bremerton, we shoot the Bremerton video, Move to Bremerton video, but we get it done pretty quickly. And while we were there, I was like, you know what? It was like 4 or 5 in the afternoon when we were done. And I was like, why don't we shoot a video for Chick Magnet? And we were all just sitting in Mike's house hanging out, and we kind of just started riffing on ideas. Like you would just joke around with your friends. Like, what if we did this? And what if Yuri was the Chick Magnet? And then what if there was all these girls? Then like Mike and Tom are there, and maybe they're having fries, and we'll sing. And we just started just joking about it. And then Mike got on the phone and started calling people. And by like 7 o'clock that night, we got to their friend's place, and we shot Chick Magnet. And Move to Bremerton wasn't the big hit single, but Chick Magnet was. And then boom, that hit MTV. And that was, I think, the first MTV music. I mean, maybe they had something play on like 120 minutes, like a Starflyer video. I don't know. But this was like their first big MTV music video. And from there, it was just on. And we were literally shooting 2 to 3 music videos a weekend for about 5 years.
Wow. So you are partially responsible for MXPX blowing up.
Well, in one sense, yes. I mean, but if I was going to take any kind of pride in that, it would just be that for as long as I've been doing this, I love just grinding things out. And we were done with the video, and we were there, and we still had film left, and we had cameras, and we were there like, well, look, we're done. Let's shoot another music video. That's what I'm most proud of. Is like, well, let's just shoot another one.
Right.
Let's shoot another one. And we shot a video for the song "Doing Time" as well. I mean, let's just keep, because you never know, and that's my approach to content and media today. There is no silver bullet. You have to make as much stuff as possible.
Yeah, right.
And if we had sat there thinking we had one great idea for one great song for Move to Bremerton, that wouldn't have happened. And so that's what I get kind of most excited about. But I'll never forget, though, to kind of back up to the Punk Rock Show music video. I was editing a new Pennywise video and a new Blink video at that time. And during that time, I was with both of those bands. And I said, hey, to Fletcher from Pennywise, let me just play this video for you. I thought he was going to say, this is lame, bunch of kids, this is so dumb.
Use the clean version of the comment.
Yeah, I will. You got it. And I played it for Fletcher, probably the most feared man in all of punk rock. And he's 6'7", crazy beard and hair at that time, down to his waist. I mean, he's just a scary guy. And I play the video. He watches it, doesn't say a word, and then it's done. And he just looked at me and said, "That's probably the best punk song I've ever heard." Man. And that's when I knew, like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Like, wait, what's going on here? And he just had this look. Fletcher just had this look on his face of like, how did someone write the most perfect punk song? And then it was only a few weeks later that I was with Blink-182 and Elise from the Dancehall Crashers, and I showed them the video. I mean, we're pulling out VHS tapes and putting VHS tapes into VCRs, and you got this band. And now I'm feeling pretty good because Fletcher gave it to he approved it, And I played it for Blink, and Blink's like, oh my goodness, we got to get this band on tour with us. And Elise sees it and goes, I want to manage this band. I want to get this band on tour with us. I want to, because she was in Dancehall Crashers and also managed the band. And it was like, boom, you know, and that's kind of always been a part of my career as well, is like, I love connecting things. I love, I love being able to say, hey, you should meet this person. You should do that. We should get that together. And that's, if you have a love for that, you just do that. And so that moment with Pennywise, that moment with Blink 182, that moment with Dancehall Crashers, I know it had a huge impact on, you know, on MXPX, and no, I'm stoked just to have been a part of it, because those guys were awesome. Those guys gave me a career. It's not that I helped them somehow get on MTV. Brandon did that. The band did that. I was just there at the right time.
Yeah.
But those guys gave me a career. Those guys, that being successful, like I said, I mean, it was probably hundreds of tooth and nail videos, and that's how I make a living. So I'm incredibly thankful.
So talk about now then how, so Brandon Ebel, who started Tooth and Nail Records, talk about how he really is responsible for leading you to Christ. I love this story. Yeah,
I mean, Brandon is super ADD. He's one of the funniest guys you could ever meet. Talks like this, and if you hear the podcast, like he almost gets there, but I'm pretty sure they gave him like an elephant tranquilizer to like calm him down so you could understand them. But like, that's Brandon. He's high pitched. He talks like this, that. Hey, don't get this new band. It's called that. It's called Zayo. It's not Zayo. Juliana Theory now. They're the heaviest band in the world. Get this. I mean, he's just he's that nonstop. It's hilarious. And he was having one of his rants, and he on a side, he was talking about, I mean, it was so strange. He's something like that, and like Mormons, there's a whole planet thing, there's a planet, and there's this weird thing, and he was just going off on something. He was like, but then C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity, that's it, and then he's like, I got to go. Let's phone call. It's Jason Carson from the Superdome. Oh, he just hangs up. And I was sitting there in my office, and I was like, what did he say at the end there? Mere Christianity. I got off work that day, and I drove to the bookstore when they still existed. And I found, I was looking for mirror, like you look into a mirror, MIRR. And I was like, oh, Mere Christianity. I was like, you know, and, you know, I was like, I just bought the book, went to my dad's house, lived close to the bookstore. I opened it, I started reading it, and like a page or two. Again, I'm not a Christian at this time, and you know, it's like a page or two in. It could be wrong. Don't quote me on the page, but it felt very, very short in that he talks about why is it when someone cuts in front of us, we think that there's an injustice. And I just stopped reading the book, and I was like, I'm a line cutter. I'm a line. I deserve to go to hell. No Baptist preacher. No one's talking about hell. I hadn't been primed. None of the Tooth and Nail guys ever shared Jesus with me. No one ever said he's got a plan for your life. No, like nothing. And I was like, I'm a line cutter. I didn't have a super low opinion of myself. I had a very high opinion of myself. And I just said, line cutter, like, I deserve to go to hell. Which is just crazy, right? It's like, even if you wanted to have some postmodern take on that, like, that was my own personal assessment. Like, no one judged me. Like, I was judging myself. And I was like, well, I don't want to read any more of this book. And I put it down, and for about 6 months, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Then I went back to my dad's house. I read maybe another chapter or so. And I was like, well, okay, I need to I need to do this. And I drove to like a little mountain, like a hill mountain, which is funny now to think of that I went to go to a mountain to meet God. And some like great typology there. And I went to, there's this little bench at the top, and I just kind of started praying, like, you know, I want to have a relationship with you, Lord, but I don't want to call myself a Christian because Christians are kind of lame. And I watch TBN a lot, and I don't know why. I can't stop watching TBN, but it's weird. But why do I keep watching it? You know, why do I think like I have a connection with Jesse Duplantis? I can't explain it. You know, it was almost like I knew he was my weird uncle. Like he was part of the family, but he's not. You know, like. You knew something was weird, like, you know, because I couldn't stop watching that stuff. Yeah. And I remember in the prayer, I said, Lord, I don't want to say I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I don't want to say I'm like a sinner. I don't want to say all that stuff, Jesus Christ, Lord and King. Like, I just want to have a relationship with you, and it's been one of the only kind of super charismatic, supernatural moments. He lifted me up. He literally just lifted me up. I remember getting lifted up off my seat. He just slammed me on the ground. I put my hands up and I was like, I accept you, as my Lord and Savior. I don't want to go to hell. You're King, you're Lord. Like it's like I'm all in. And then I was like, wow, what just happened?
Yeah.
And I got up and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go read my Bible. And I was like, I'm not gonna tell anybody. It's gonna be me and my Bible and you, God. And it was the only audible moment I've ever had, and I just heard God speak, and he just said, no. Like, I just stopped, and I've told the story before, but the cadence scares me to this day, because he just said, no. He said, you're going to tell everybody about me.
Joke's on you, Darren.
Yeah, right? Actually, he said, no, you're not cool anymore. Actually, he said, you're not cool anymore. I forget. He said, you're not cool anymore, and you're going to tell everybody. And the way that I heard everybody, it was like, you're going to tell everybody about me. And it was like, okay, it's on his terms, which is why, I didn't know what predestination was, Calvinism was. Like, all I knew was he was in charge, and then of course your life gets totally wrecked because you come to Jesus, But all that was from music videos, Tooth and Nail, Brandon Ebel, that moment, and then like boom, now I'm a Christian.
Man, that's awesome. Okay, so we're gonna go to a commercial break here, but when we come back, then I'm gonna have you talk about what you did after coming to Christ.
You got it.
And be a disciple.
First phone call.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll take that break now. We'll see you guys here on the other side of the break.
What kind of society will we be responsible for building, and what kind of people are we sending into the world?
Part of our mission in working to redeem culture is to connect with people in various professions to help them to understand their life and calling as a process of culture building.
Our work is best demonstrated at the H. Evan Runner International Academy for Cultural Leadership. The Runner Academy represents a comprehensive instruction in Christian philosophy, worldview, and cultural apologetics. This 2-week course brings students and young professionals on site for a training program like no other. History, politics, law, education, medicine, the arts. There is a biblical vision for all of these spheres to bring them into obedience to Jesus the King and to develop them toward cultural renewal to the glory of God.
The goal for New St. Andrews College, as it trains its students, is not to make people who will be able to go out and just get jobs, people who will just be bricks in the wall of our society. The goal for New St. Andrews College is to make students into men and women who will really impact culture.
I want their faith to not just be something that stands, but something around which culture can be built.
We want students who can think critically about arguments, but also about the culture around them, that can then speak clearly to it, and that also have the ability to influence and shape because of the power of their message. Because that's really what the gospel does. The gospel throws down all the arguments against it. It speaks to the hearts of people, it influences, and it changes.
Go to apologiastudios.com, get signed up, partner with us in All Access. You get all of the radio programs, you get the TV show, you get the after show, including Apologia Academy, and you partner with us in ministry, bringing the gospel around the world.
All right, welcome back to Apologia
What kind of
Radio. I'm
society
so
will we
excited
be
for this
responsible
next
for building?
next
And what
portion
kind
here.
of people
So
are we
Darren,
sending
you
into
left
the world?
off.
It's about to get geeky. It's about to
Part
get
of our
geeky.
mission in working to redeem culture
So,
is to connect with people
yes,
in
we're
various
actually going to get to
professions
theology
to
here.
help
So
them to understand
you
their life
come to
and
Christ.
calling
What's the
as a
first phone
process
call
of
you make?
culture building.
I called David Bonson. David
Our
Bonson
work
was a
is
good
best
friend. He managed
demonstrated
the
at the
Supertones at that
H.
time. He had a
International
touring
Academy
agency
for Cultural
at
Leadership.
that time. He was
The
actually
Runner
part of Tooth and
Academy
Nail Records. A lot of
presents
people
a
don't know that, but then there was laws
comprehensive
about can you be a
instruction,
management company and a
philosophy,
record
worldview,
company, so
and
they
cultural
split it. David had
This two-week course
became the
brings
touring
students
company
and
slash
young
management
professionals
company.
on
That's how the
site
whole thing kind of worked
for a
out.
training program like no other.
David Bonson is the
History,
son of the
politics,
great late
law,
Greg Bonson.
education, medicine.
Yeah, you guys didn't hear that wrong.
I don't know what that means at that time, but I called Dave Bonson. I say, Dave, I've given my life to Christ. I'm a Christian. And he says, great, get on down. And I drove like an hour and a half down to Irvine or somewhere down there where, maybe Newport, where he lived at the time. And I got to his apartment, and he gave me the Great Debate audio cassette tape between Gordon Stein and Greg Bonson.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me a book called Before Jerusalem Fell by Ken Gentry, all about the year AD 70 and the destruction of the temple. And he gave me a little blue book, I think Matthew 20 by Marcellus Kick, a little just small commentary on Revelation 20, on Revelation 20. And he said, listen to this and read these two books and you'll do just fine.
It's amazing.
I said, okay. He said, in about a week or two, I'll come up and I'll give you a Bible study. So I listened to that debate probably about 20 times in those weeks, looked up words. What does presuppositional mean? What does transcendental mean? What does this mean? And started figuring out what this, it was a new language to me. I read Before Jerusalem Fell. I'm reading that. He starts talking about Josephus, and then I go and buy the complete works of Josephus. So I'm reading all of Josephus. Then I'm reading this little book on Revelation 20. He comes down a few weeks later, spends about 4 hours with me at my apartment, and he gives me a Bible study and goes through all of the book of Revelation with me.
That's amazing.
And he says, this is going to keep you from being weird.
Joke's on you again.
Yeah, well, can you imagine what would have happened if I was a dispensationalist? And so that's all I knew from day one. I knew, so it's funny because, most people kind of claim when they come to Calvinism or postmillennialism, or it's like, what people have to understand about me, not that anyone needs to, but we're talking about me, is that you are a product. If someone's raised in the South, they go, oh, they're raised in the South. They're a Southern Baptist. They've got their quirks. They got their whatever. I mean, from day one, the only thing I knew was Calvinism, postmillennialism, presuppositional apologetics,
right?
That the destruction of the temple in the year AD 70 was the most pivotal moment in all of history. And that if you didn't understand the temple being destroyed, you didn't understand Christianity at all. Right. You could know how to be saved. You could understand salvation. You can understand hell and not going there and being a good person. But the big cosmic picture, if you didn't understand what actually happened in the year 70, like, you were missing the entire narrative of all of human history and then where it's going. That's, that is all I knew. I mean, that's it. I mean, that's from day one.
Yeah.
That's the. So I guess I was Reformed. I wasn't so much covenantal in a weird way because no one really talked much about that. But I was. That's what I was. So my entire working out of understanding apologetics, reading Van Til, I read the complete works of Van Til. Because I was new. I didn't have any hurdles to get over. It was learning a new language that didn't have any hurdles, and so how I talk about things and did apologetics, and then and I took in everything. I took in all the Norman Geisler books and the R.C. Sproul books and all that, but I was rooted in kind of this post-millennial Bonson Van Til kind of framework that I'm incredibly thankful for, because I think it really has. It's kept me out of a lot of ditches, and in a lot of ways, I think it's also helped me be a part of bridges that need to be built in regards to where we're going. And I took flack for it. By the time I got into Christian culture, I mean, I took flack for it, you know. But there was the Supertones. And the Supertones was the band that I've been doing music videos for before I was a Christian. Now here I was a Christian. I'd get on the set, and me and Matt, the singer from Supertones, we could sit there because he was a Bonson fanatic, and we could talk presuppositional apologetics, and we could talk about, you know, Josephus and Tacitus and, you know, Roman history and what happened when the temple was destroyed. And so slowly meeting people and realizing, and then going back and listening to all the Supertones music and realizing that, dude, all of Matt's lyrics were just reformed theology.
Yeah.
And it was like, wait a minute, you know, and you're singing about the perseverance of the saints, and you're like, wait, what's going on? And so, you know, all that really helped because I didn't have really a church body. There was no Christian culture that in any way supported what I was doing and what I believed. And so that connection to Matt of the Supertones was huge, and it blew my mind when you mentioned that you had a connection to Matt.
Yeah.
Luke.
Yeah. And so that brings, okay, so before I get into that, one quick thing. I was thinking, even when the first quote you mentioned that kind of changed your thinking a little bit, and C.S. Lewis was really a presuppositional question, right?
Yes.
Why are you angry? It was, well, you know, that gets to the point of what's anger, what's morality, you know. So there's that, which I thought was cool. So really, you know, you're influenced directly, you know, again by precept, theonomy, post-mill, all that, and so.
By what standard? I mean,
exactly.
I mean, by what standard has, even when I've gone, even early on as a Christian, when I went through some hard times, I remember asking myself, by what standard? Like, how am I even going to assess the situation I'm in?
Yeah, exactly. And so how, I want to just, before I get into my side of the story, I want to talk about, because maybe people don't know how you really have directly influenced Apologia Studios, and we talked about this on the phone a couple weeks ago. But really, like, your style, you're talking about the shaky cam, you know, like the way you do videography was essentially, you taught that to Marcus. Marcus took that and did his own brand of it, and then Marcus has taught Carmen. Now Carmen does that, and so everything you see from Apologia Studios visually really is fruit of Darren, of you, and so like that's one aspect, right? Is how we've been influenced. Yeah. Okay. So now you mentioned Matt Morginski. So this is where I started freaking out. So when I was listening to the podcast, the labeled podcast, you know, they mentioned your name, and then you mentioned Dave Bonson. I kept hearing them say Dave Bonson, and I'm like, is that David Bonson? Like,
not
you know,
a super common last name,
like
but you're like, how could it be? How could it be?
We obviously know Dave. We've had him on our show, and so I hit up David Lohman, who's listening to the show right now. David, what's up, dude? Because I know David Lohman and David Bonson are like best friends, right? And I knew that David has history in the music industry, so I hit him up and I was like, I'm listening to this podcast. Is this like our David Bonson? He's like, oh yeah. And so he starts telling me how essentially him and David Bonson, I believe, were at Frontline Records, and then Brandon Ebel came over, and then he ended up leaving Frontline to start Tooth and Nail, and ended up bringing both Davids with him eventually. And so all the wheels start turning at this point, and I'm going, oh my gosh, wait a minute. And so I'm talking to you then on the phone, I think, or maybe we were texting, and you mentioned Matt Morginski and the Supertones, and then everything clicked all at once. And so back in, I think it was 99 or 2000, my wife and I, Cheryl, we were dating at the time. We started dating when we were 17, so I think we were 18 or 19, and we were at a winter camp. We were actually youth leaders. The pastor that married my wife and I, we were at this winter camp, and he had somehow bumped into Matt Morginski at a hotel playing basketball or something. I don't even remember, and talked him into doing this winter camp for us. And so we're at this winter camp, and Matt Morginski is teaching, and guess what he's teaching? Presuppositional apologetics.
Wow.
And it completely transformed my life in the way I did evangelism, and it ruined me forever, right? So like, so when we're having this conversation, and then all of a sudden I realize, wait a minute, I learned presuppositional apologetics from Matt Morginski. Matt Morginski learned it from David Bonson, and so like all the stuff starts coming together, like, you know, so what you see here at the Apologia Studios, visually, again, we trace that back, and then like theologically and methodologically, you know, this was 7 years before I met Jeff, maybe 8 years before I'd ever met Jeff. I didn't even live in Arizona then, and you know, so like all this stuff's just coming together like this perfect storm, you know, and so I've been freaking out for 3 weeks, like we got to talk about this, we got to tell this story, you know.
And this is the thing, you know, as time went on, I'm sure there were plenty of people who were thinking, well, what was the point of Tooth and Nail Records?
Yeah,
you know, like, you know, you have bands that become apostate, and you have this, and you have that, and all this time, you know, and you have to look into the details of what God is always doing,
right?
You know, and I mean, you could do that right now. I mean, it's, you know, the church looks like a mess right now. What's going on with Southern Baptists and this and that, and I mean, you could say, oh, we've got you know, but all these things are happening, and it got me really inspired too, because I was thinking, yeah, like this dude Greg Bonson, who, you know, passes away at a pretty young age, and his son decides not to get into finance yet, although he is now, and is a part of a Christian record label, which should be a joke. And it has the impact that it has, and then you get guys like us who are being touched by it, and here we are now, and we're both, and you know, everyone that we work with, that we're talking with, that's around us, is influenced by that, and we have our sights set on some pretty big things.
Yeah. Hey, Darren.
And those things come from a particular kind of worldview.
Right.
Hey, Darren. So me being a Supertones fan myself, the biggest album that, or at least the first album that I came across, was Chase the Sun, that came in 99.
Oh, you're late to the game on
I know,
that, son.
so a little bit later generation, but my favorite song off of that album is Grounded. And so my question is the one lyric, I think, where he says, learn how to fight from words on a paper, learn from the Shoguns, Bonson and Schaefer. So that lyric, I mean, it's obviously very relevant to everything that you were just jumping right into the game, being a brand new Christian. So when that album came out, and when that obviously song that was part of the album came out, was that kind of when you were working with Matt, kind of learning that where you ran into this, or where were you kind of like in when that song was written? Because it feels like it's part and parcel to when you were jumping on and how that song was written.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the order of the album. I did their first album. I did Adonai off the first album.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think is the second album Strike Back?
Yeah, that's the second one. And then I think Chase the Sun is the third album.
Chase the Sun, I mean, I'm with them at that time for sure. The only video I think I did off that album, unless it's the next album, a song called Wilderness.
Oh yeah, I know that song.
But I mean, I'm with them at that time. I mean, I'm with them, and you know, I mean, again, those guys were my lifeblood. I mean, there was no Reformed post-mill community. It didn't exist.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I remember even.
Does it exist now?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Now,
yeah.
But see, it does now, which is crazy, you know. And so when you can link everything from a Moscow, Idaho, down to you guys, you know, down to what we know artists are doing and filmmakers and writers, like there's a whole new thing happening right now, and as things are crumbling right now, there's a whole group that I think are coming up right now. I'm excited to be a part of that. A very intentional group of people that are saying, like, look, the world's not ending anytime soon, so we got to start planting seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I love all this. So that's why I love, Jerry, when I see you're doing Cultish, like, boom, all of a sudden, that's your first thing. That's your first thing. Like, you're planting seeds. You know? Like, we don't even know what that's going to be 20 years from now.
Right.
Like, and it's going to come back to that seed. For me, it was an MXPX. Or it was a Mike Knott music video.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Well,
Go ahead.
Just so one other thing I remember you talking about this at ReformCon, because we're talking specifically to the Reform community, especially it's relevant to what you were working with, the different type of music labels you were working with, specifically Tooth and Nail, where you were saying how right now the culture is so, it's so inundated and it's going so far off the rails, where in a sense, being Christians and getting married and having a family and just, and following the Bible, how it's supposed to be interpreted, not being liberal, that's the new punk rock,
Right.
And I was thinking too, that like right now, for example, not to toot my own horn, because there's so many different people there's so many different working parts of Cultish. I'm just sometimes behind the microphone, but like right now in iTunes, it's in the top 100 as far under Christianity and under religion and spirituality. And I was trying to think, why is that? Well, every other brand of spirituality is some weird woo woo. It's like Stephen Furtick, Joel Osteen, all this lovey-dovey stuff. But there's this untapped marketplace of this controversial, weird fringe stuff that people want answers to. So it's, like
Absolutely.
I said.
No, and I'm so fired up for what you're doing, and it really is. I mean, that is, I think I remember that talk. I was saying that we need to start building things. We need to start building institutes, building relationships.
Yeah.
And with a coherent worldview. And by the way, you just made me think how the new punk rock is actually being that firm in the Word, being that firm in what the Bible says. And even those who maybe who just maybe don't have a bent towards battle and warfare, who just maybe thought like, well, I don't want to be that controversial. I just want to be a nice Christian that people like. I want to build relationships. Look where that got you the last 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean,
you gave him an inch, and look where we're at now. We don't even know what a boy and a girl is anymore. Right. So, I mean, and that wasn't the case 5 years ago. We gave people an inch, and that's what happened. Joy, what's on your mind, Joy? Come on, Joy.
I was just thinking about kind of what Jerry was talking about, and then obviously what you've been talking about the whole time, which is kind of, well, I guess it's really about taking back that inch, and knowing that, we have all. This is obviously an age of media. It's full of content. You can find you can find every piece of information on the internet, whether it's right or wrong.
Right.
But I know that there are plenty of people who are creative and media-minded, and for some reason, we've sort of seen this, like the birth of this generation of Christians that are willing to approach creative industry more, instead of just like, oh, I just like painting, but you have people who are like, no, I like talking into a microphone, and I like singing into a microphone, and I like recording stuff on a camera, and I'm going to do it in a way that's Christian. And earlier you mentioned like a Christian version of everything. So like some people would say that like there shouldn't be a show on cults that includes Jonestown, because cults and true crime and stuff, that's sort of like a thing that like the world talks about. But that's something that we should talk about, because even, and this is why when Jerry came and was talking about the idea for Cultish, I was like, this show will do great, because it's so popular to talk about cults right now. There are tons of podcasts about cults.
Well, and like I said, Jonestown makes the point, it might be good to know what Revelation's talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's
because if you don't, why not?
Right.
If you're wrong about the book of Revelation, then why not Jonestown?
Right.
Yeah, and even, for example, you learn that theology matters, because every single person had a worldview. They ultimately, like in Jonestown, they drank the Kool-Aid because Jim Jones told them to, but they thought that Jim Jones was God, and that worldview came specifically from it was New Thought and a lot of the New Age origins and stuff like that. But I was going to say, too, when you want to talk about just getting out a message to the world, I was going to say, if you ever wanted to, if someone wants to jump on this is a great idea. So we obviously are all on the same page a lot about the law of God. If you want to do a great podcast about the law of God, you should actually try and make the best true crime podcast as you possibly can, but then give the law of God as the solutions for how you deal with those things.
Really excited.
No, I mean, it's great, yeah. We need to be a part of. So all this to say, and we've always lived in a world like this. There's always people that are creating content, creating information, finding new ways to spread information. That is what we do as humans. Christians are the people that understand why we do that, and they understand the importance of real and true content. And
it's funny you say that, because as I was watching the Bob Lazar documentary, I was thinking there's only one worldview that can make sense of what he's talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the whole time, even when he talks about that, there's like how did he describe it? That there was like an anti-gravity field around the thing he was working on.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he kept talking about like that's like you have to understand like that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't exist. Like, but it was happening, and like only the Christian worldview can make sense of like, wait, you mean science might be wrong on how they think the world is created?
Yeah.
Like, so in his worldview, you can't live in this universe and there's something that is anti-gravity.
Right.
It's like, but in the Christian worldview, I have no problem with anti-gravity. Like,
well, yeah, I guess a miracle is not a problem for the...
Exactly.
Just right. The laws of physics.
Exactly.
Right.
Not working.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just think that it's so important that, I'm sort of we all take turns moderating the comments on this show. So I've kind of been watching the comments basically to get rid of the Holocaust deniers, but pretty much everyone gets to stay on there.
We haven't had any flat earthers today, I don't think.
No. But basically
there are now that you mentioned them.
I know, yeah. Now they'll go crazy. But basically, I think it's so important. We have had a few people in the comments say, "Oh, this is boring. Why am I listening to a conversation about music?" But the point is that this is the Christian's job, which right now specifically to step into the postmodern world that we live in, where nothing means anything. Or anything, or whatever, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
There's no meaning, or it's all subjective meaning, or whatever it is, and just be like, no, this is meaningful. It's information, and information has meaning. So we're gonna just take that back. Thanks.
Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say one thing, Darren, is that there's a guy I follow, and he's Paul Joseph Watson. And he had a segment one time where he's just talking about the postmodern shift the whole culture has taken in relation to art. And he was talking about all these places in Europe, these European art centers, and even talked a lot bit too about music, because now there's no objective standard for beauty.
Right.
You see this bizarre artwork going on where I think one time there's just a bunch of just clutter that was just like thrown onto a floor. Like in this art museum, they called it art.
That's atheism.
Yeah, and you see that too, like with music now. I mean, you look at the typical pop music, where I think it's called the millennial whoop, where it's like, and but it's with you see that beat within every single song, and this commercialized, just garbage, and just what they sing about. You look at really popular artists like Bing Crosby or like just any stuff that's like stuck around for a long time versus the typical music that comes out now. There's a reason why Christians should be in the marketplace making the best type of music, because we have an objective standard of beauty on which to go by, and you're seeing the consequences of that now with the way music is. At least I've seen it.
Well, and ultimately what we're talking about here is culture building, right?
Yeah.
And
well, and by the way, let's address just in case, I can't see comments, but let's just assume there's let's just be nice little Christians for a minute.
Yeah.
And I was a dude going to hell. Like perfect candidate.
Yeah.
And because a bunch of young Christians got together and formed a record company, like I'm not going to hell.
That's God's sovereignty, though, right? The providence of God is what we're talking about.
Right. So it turns out that what Christians do and the things they build matter, because the more you build, the more those spheres touch and then they intersect.
Yeah.
And I was a guy that nothing was going to find me in this little music industry bubble.
Yeah.
But because a bunch of Christians decided to create their own bubble and it overlapped.
Yep.
I was brought into that. And so when Christians do that and things begin to overlap, all of a sudden you're sitting there And there's a guy like me that gets met and the gospel gets brought. And it doesn't even have to be intentional witnessing. God brings that in a throwaway comment from Brandon Ebel just talking.
Right.
And that's a hook that gets me to Lewis.
Yeah, exactly.
So it matters.
Right.
Because everything matters.
Right, exactly. And so, quickly, by the way, Jason, I see you just comment about Zao. I actually wore my Zao Liberate Tex and Ferris shirt to August Burns Red last night, and my wife was like, I think your shirt's older than most of the kids at the show. But I digress. We're talking about...
I saw Zao in a trailer.
I saw them at a really tiny club once. There was
in
like
Seattle,
there.
Brandon took me, a band called Zao, guess this band Zao, in a trailer, in a single wide, not a double wide, a single wide.
Oh my goodness.
They were playing in. And then I remember just a few weeks later, it was a few months later, like Brett called me. He's like, I got this new band. It's a side project. And I don't even tell anybody about it. It's called the Juliana Theory.
Oh, yeah.
And sent me the first 5 songs of it.
Goodness.
And I was like, this is going to be huge.
Yeah. Changed my life.
Just one more Tooth and Nail.
That's amazing.
So funny. Well, yeah, and even in...
maybe we'll stay on the Tooth and Nail Facebook site.
What was that?
I said we'll tell a few more stories so we can stay on the Facebook.
Oh yeah.
So okay, so quickly, so the culture building we're talking about, culture is just religion externalized, right? That's what Joe Boot calls it, and that's what we're talking about. It's culture. Music is culture, and all the stuff we're talking about, how it all ties together, how what we have here ties back. I said what degree of separation from Tooth and Nail? We're probably like, depending on where you start with 0 or 1, we're maybe 2 or 3, but this is all culture, and it's making good culture that honors and glorifies God, and that's why we're here. That's why this is all here, because of believers' faithfulness to making good culture. And
I met a guy who was an all-access member to you guys.
Uh-huh.
And actually sat through like the 2-hour bonus interview on the Free Speech Apocalypse with me and Doug and Jeff. And I think you were there too.
Yeah, I was there. Uh-huh.
You were there too, right?
Yeah.
And he watched the whole thing, and I made a comment that there's just something happening up in Moscow, Idaho. And next, a year or 2 later, he comes up. He says, I remember watching that video, and I thought I'll just come up and check it out. He moves up. Next thing you know, he's in our church. Next thing you know, he's going to New St. Andrews College. Next thing you know, he's doing some intern work for me. Now he's working for another company. I mean, and he's found his niche because he was listening to the 2-hour all-access, behind-the-scenes bonus interview, and that changed his life.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It's crazy.
Yeah. It is crazy. Joy, you were going to say something, weren't you?
Oh, I was just going to say, well, and so we ragged on our comment section a second ago, but also in our comment section is a bunch of people who are like, oh, I love this show, this is bringing back so many memories. And so even apart from Darren and apart from Luke or myself or Jerry, you have this whole subculture of little punk Christians that came out of this label that could tell you 10 bands off the top of their head that they loved because they were a Christian band, and they were cool and not just like something your grandparents listened to, which is, there's nothing wrong with listening to the same music as your grandparents, but
look, everyone has a home team, and as Christians we have a home team, and when we can bring our punk band to the fight and they can go up against No Effects and crush them, we win. That's awesome. That's the home team.
That's a great point.
And I would argue, give me any genre of music, and Tooth and Nail has a band that wins hands down.
I agree.
There is not a better punk band than MXPX. There is no one heavier on this planet than almost all of Solid State.
Right.
I mean, I'll just take Zao and Living Sacrifice alone, and I'll wipe anybody off the mosh pit. I mean,
August Burns Red.
Absolutely right. So I mean, it's what Tooth and Nail did, what they've done, what they're continuing to do now, because they're they're having a moment right now. Brandon is coming back, the smartest dude on the planet when it comes to music. He knows what he's doing. But I just love that. Yeah, you have your team. You like it when somebody wins from your hometown.
Right.
That's how we're wired. Right. And I just love that from a music standpoint. Those of us who came from that world, and music dominates the entire culture. That the fact that Tooth and Nail has been able to not just compete but win, I'm really proud of that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I actually, you and I have talked about this, Darren. I always say this. I really truly believe that Christian, specifically metal, and you talk about punk rock, but specifically I've said this about metal, it's far superior to secular metal, and I don't just mean lyrically. Yes, absolutely lyrically, but I mean when it comes to musically, I feel like it's far superior. I feel like the quality is far better. And
Absolutely.
There's very few secular metal bands I can even tolerate just because I hate the music.
Right.
And I believe that's because, again, we're talking about people making good culture to the glory of God. Now, that being said, just for the record, not every band on Tooth and Nail and Solid State are like maybe not even necessarily Christians, or they might have I just listened to the O Sleeper interview. The lead singers are solid Christian, but the guitarist is an atheist, and they talk about how that works. But the point is when you're being influenced by Christianity to any degree, really whatsoever, you're bound and determined to have a better quality. And so absolutely, I just wanted to
right. And I would just kind of drizzle sauce on that. But it's not going to happen unless we're helping nourish those communities. And so whether it's podcasting, filmmaking, music, you've got to give people some room to grow and get them some sort of that support. And that's what I think Tooth and Nail did. That's what I think you guys are doing. I'm just now starting to think in those terms. So to me, that gets me really excited and optimistic about the future.
Yeah, Post Mill.
And also, Darren, you getting connected to Tooth and Nail and all those connections had you come to Christ, which also that allowed, and also you got into Bonson, which you combine that with your filmmaking skills, you ended up having connections later on that led to making this film called Collision, which for me that's been one of the most influential apologetic documentaries I've ever watched, and I've forwarded to so many people, and I've lost count of how many times I've watched it. I could watch it right now and be completely glued to it. And
by the way, and I've said it before, but that was an influence from bands and being on the road. And I'm not in a metal band. I can't play an instrument. How do I make a metal, hip hop, rock album, but with a movie? And that was my first real outlet of being able to say, I'm going to make something based on the structure. I see all my heroes and bands, what they've done. This is now my outlet. So that's how they inspired me, was this is me going on the road now. This is me taking the stage. This is me pretending like I'm Norma Jean, and we're just going to just destroy, every band that's going to walk on the stage after us. That's what I wanted Collision to do, is because I saw bands doing that.
Yeah, and also your skill set of music video making. That I remember the first time we hung out when you came to ReformCon and I was driving you around, you had told me that, and you could probably know what I'm going to lead you into here, but you said the very ending of Collision, you weren't done filming it, but you knew in that moment this has to be the end before you're done filming it. And tell everyone about that as well.
Yeah, we were we were still a day and a half left of filming, but we were in the car, and I was just sitting across from Doug and Christopher Hitchens, so they're sitting next to each other, and I've got my little handy cam, and Hitchens just starts talking, and he kind of just switches topics, and he starts talking about the sort of the four horsemen of atheism, and at an event they were at. And he then goes on to say how, he talked about how if he had the ability and the power to eradicate all of religion or get rid of every religious person on the planet, would he? He starts talking about this, and I remember thinking oh my goodness, whatever's happening here, this is the end of the movie. I didn't know what yet. And it's a little handy cam, so you can do the little zoom, the little zoom toggle. And if you pull it just a millimeter, it'll go real slow zoom. I was like, Lord, I just pray that when this Zoom ends, it's on his face tight and he says something crazy. It was nuts. And it's just a slow zoom, and it gets tight on his face, and then he just says that,
That's
he wouldn't eradicate it. If he could get rid of it, he just wouldn't get rid of it. And he says, and the look that I think Dawkins gives him, the look of credulity, I think he says.
Yeah. Man.
He has not left him, and it actually haunts him. The look that they gave him, that he would not eradicate all of religion. And and now we're zoomed in, it's on his face. He's saying that. I just remember thinking, like, I don't know what else is going to happen in this movie, but the end.
Man, that's incredible. The providence of God, though. Well, hey, man, I appreciate it, Darren. I know we're keeping a little long here. I'm glad we got to do this. Love you, dude. I'm excited to see what you're doing, and you
ReformCon. Maybe I'll get that invite to ReformCon.
Yes, yeah, but hold on before you hang up, because we'll talk about that. So yeah, man. Enjoy. Anything else?
No,
Jerry, thanks for being on today, dude.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Jerry. I'm proud of you, man.
As always, thank you so much to all our All Access subscribers.
Yes.
I mean that we say that all the time, but I don't know if people realize it. I mean it. Like none of this would be here. None of this would exist if it wasn't for you guys. So we thank you. If you're not All Access, please go to apologiastudios.com. You can sign up there. And also visit End Abortion Now.
Have more stuff. We have more stuff coming to All Access. I was talking to Jeff the other day. We got more stuff coming.
Sweet. I know you and I have been talking. We'll hopefully do some more stuff too. So, all right, man. Well, thanks a lot, brother.
Thanks, Apologia fans and listeners. It's always great to be here talking with you guys and hanging out.
Awesome, brother. Thanks a lot. Also, again, check out the Labeled Podcast. It's awesome. Peace out.
See ya.
See ya.